Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday said, I invite the world to invest in India based on the five pillars of talent, market, capital, ecosystem, and openness. And he was really going out to say that he wants global capital to come to India, and it is important for this capital to come to India because even they benefit, because India is and for a long time is going to remain a huge market. Not too long ago in 2019, he had also said while addressing a global business forum that if you invest in a market where there is scale, come to India. If you want to invest in a market with the largest infrastructure ecosystem and urbanization, as in the possibilities of urbanization, come to India. So we're going to take up the Prime Minister's comment and ask business leaders and representatives from the legal community and how we can make this mission a reality. And I welcome on the show today Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani. He is Managing Director of the Hiranandani Group. He, in the past, has been the President of ASSOCHAM Industry Group and the National President of National Real Estate Development Council, which he currently heads. Welcome, Mr. Hiranandani. I also welcome Mr. Ryan Karanjawala on the show. He is the founder and the managing partner of country's foremost litigation law firm, Karanjawala and Company. Thank you so much for making time. And may I want to congratulate him on his latest victory, which he won for Ratan Tata in the Cyrus Mistry and Tata case. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's long ago now. Yeah.
And I also want to welcome Mr. Alok Shriram. He is the Deputy Managing Director of DCM Shriram Industries, Chairman and Managing Director of DCM Hyundai, and past President of the PhD Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Mr. Shriram. So let us begin by requesting Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani to lay the ground. You heard the Prime Minister. Where are we headed from here?
Nangia, we have to be very clear about the whole issue that the demographic dividend of India in terms of population has always been an opportunity second to none. So that is the first thing we definitely have in our favor. I remember traveling once from Geneva to Mumbai on a flight, and I had a Swiss gentleman next to me, and I was in conversation, and I asked him, what are you doing in India? He said he comes at least 4 days a month to India in order to find out what the opportunities in order to do business in India. And I asked him, I said, why is it that you choose India? He said, you know, we don't make any new highways in Switzerland. We don't make any new power stations in Switzerland. We don't make any hydro plants in Switzerland. We don't make anything new as far as these things are concerned. So India is a land of opportunity. So what I see today and what the Prime Minister desires to encash is two parts. One, there is so much money outside, so much money, printed and otherwise, which is available to here. And second, the world has very limited opportunities. That is why our stock market is bursting with funds coming in, and also the opportunities in India. So what is the Prime Minister saying? Something which is a reality. He's only saying, I'll help you to do so, which is a good sign for India. And I'm sure he will succeed if at all the ease of doing business which he's talking about happens on the ground level. We will definitely succeed in this operation.
Okay. And in fact, I like to point out from what you said that the American companies have trillion-dollar valuations, and we still are celebrating barely $100 billion company as India's biggest. In terms of global scale, we are nowhere, but that gives us a good opportunity to grow. I'll go to Alok Shriram. Can you explain in your own worldview about how do you see India going about this now? Because China gets older in 2050. They'll all be about 50 plus average median age. India still will be in 2050, will be 38, 35. So India is going to remain young for a long time to come.
Thanks, Tarun. Yeah, I'd like to comment on what you're saying. Firstly, let me say that as an industry group and as an industry association, we welcome the Prime Minister's call for foreigners to come and invest in India. As Mr. Hiranandani said, there is money sloshing around all over the world. trying to find safe havens. And I think India, to that effect, is certainly a very great place for them to come and invest. However, at the same time, there are other challenges which we face. One has to fight on multiple fronts. One is getting investment from abroad, but that is a medium to long-term issue. It may take 1 to 2 or 3 years to give rise to, let's say, jobs or actual creation of wealth. Getting money into the stock market is not creation of wealth. So I think if we have to do that, we have to look at our domestic industry, which is already on the ground and which has taken a severe beating, including, I think, 3 sectors where they should concentrate. The first is actually the MSME, which is getting beaten down like hell. The big boys are like the steel industry is making a lot of money, but it's being translated into a lot of sickness in the small scale engineering industry. I think ease of doing business on the ground is not really translating itself. And Mr. Karanjawala will be able to give you a lot more on that. So I'm not going to speak except say that there is a lot of good intention at the senior levels, but it's not translating. And it's actually in some cases becoming more complex and complicated. There are new rules and regulations. I mean, between MCA and SEBI, they can't have simple consensus on simple things. So you have different dates for the same, legal requirement, and you have to follow one or the other, or rather the one which is more tight. So it's things like that. I think the government has to get ease of doing business. First, as I said, was MSME. The second is Mr. Hiranandani's area of construction. And the third, I would say, is the hospitality industry. These are the 3 industries which have taken a huge beating. And these are the 3 which can also come back and create the jobs. India needs jobs. We need distribution of wealth. And that is where I doubt if fresh investment from overseas will actually help us. We need this happening now. If we are opening up, we need to open these areas up quickly. Within India, there is a lot of money. I can tell you that. But it has to be channelized, and the government also has to do its part. I think in the last decade or so, there has been a lot of wealth creation in India. It can be seen in the villages of India. You don't have to go to big cities. If you go to the villages, you see the way people are living, the kind of cars they're driving, the aspirations of the youngsters. And that's where I come to your question of demographics. The youngsters are very aspirational now, and they're willing to do what it needs to meet those aspirations. But the first thing we need is jobs. And I think that is the area where the government must concentrate and help these 3 industries revive so that they create the jobs. They can do it virtually overnight. Thanks.
Point very well taken. In fact, good you pointed out, cement and steel has been getting prohibitively expensive, making the cost of dwellings very higher. There is news about cartelization in the cement sector. The government, all to good intention, has tried to do something, but let us see if that bears fruit in the coming days. I'll go to Mr. Karanjawala now. Mr. Karanjawala, a lot of government ministers have said that the best way to make in India would be for faster dispute resolution mechanism and enforcement of contracts. Many European companies come to India, but they're scared of enforcement of contracts not happening, that what they write on paper will not be honored. And then litigation sometimes takes up time. So how do you think that will be solved? Because now a lot of business in India hinges on court disputes, because be it NHAI contracts in which a lot of time vendors aren't paid, they go and contest in court. Even if they win, the government says that, okay, we will appeal to the Supreme Court. They have won the arbitral award, but payments are not made. So, this is actually a place where a lot of money is stuck and companies become NPA. How should this be solved in your view?
Well, first of all, to answer your specific question, and then I'll deal with another aspect. To answer your specific question, the government will have to take a it's very simple. The government will have to take a proactive step to ensure that cases that don't require to be contested bitterly are not contested. For example, what you can have is you can have a sort of a high-powered panel of secretaries of different government departments sitting together and taking an informal view, and a dynamic law minister like Ravi Shankar Prasad could well motivate something like that happening, so that you cut through the red tape, you take many matters which have got stuck in a quagmire in court can be just sat across the table and solved. And this culture that has been prevalent for the last few years, which is that every bureaucrat looks over his shoulder to see whether a decision taken by him tomorrow will be scrutinized by the CBI, that can be something that can be let loose of. Slowly, a cultural change has to come. You have to create a situation where governments come forward and say, look, let's sit across the table. We feel that this is a fair way to settle the matter. Let's settle the matter. Let's move on. So that's one way you can do it. To come back to the original topic that you had, Tarun, which is the Prime Minister saying that India should utilize its 5 major capitals that it has: talent, market, capital, ecosystem, culture of openness, to attract finances into India, to attract business into India. In the legal profession, I see a great opportunity. The reason is that in India, and I'm now speaking only about my profession, the reason is that in India, there is a huge amount of legal talent. One, lots of people, especially in the last few years, have come and started studying towards the law. So there's a huge legal pool of talent available. Secondly, the advantage this talent has is that it is familiar not only with the English way of working, because that's broadly the system we follow, but also with the English language. So with that advantage, India can very easily make itself into one of the international hubs of arbitration. Today, the 3 main international hubs of arbitration, which we know, are London, in our part of the world, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And the kind of work that goes there is $10 billion, $20 billion worth of disputes can come up and get sorted out in the course of a quarter or a year, So Hong Kong, as it is going to come slowly under a cloud for a variety of reasons, which all of you are familiar with. India must somehow step up and attract all that kind of arbitration. Now, the one way to do it is to resolve a problem that has been a long pending dispute. I remember 35 years ago, I appeared for Whitehead case in the Supreme Court in the question as to whether foreign firms should be allowed into India or not. That thing is still unresolved. That dispute is still going on. Maybe the time has come to consider as to whether one should allow them in a very limited field, namely arbitration. So what you do is you say to the firms, you come in, set up shop here, we'll allow you to only practice one aspect of the law, which is arbitration, and you can do that in conjunction, in partnership with the existing firms, or you can hire people from us. So what I expect would happen is that all the firms which are keen to get a foothold into India would say, all right, let's take the chance. If it's only arbitration, so be it. They sort of expact their second, third tier people down to India to start shop. They hire people from India. They start shop. Now, once the lawyers come, then the clients will follow. And therefore, arbitrations which they would have easily spun off in London or Hong Kong or Singapore, they bring to India, A, because it's cheaper. So the client also says that, well, look, why not? Secondly, the client has a sense of familiarity. The same firm that he was dealing with abroad is the firm that he deals with in India. So it's really like dealing with a branch of the same firm. He feels much more comfortable coming forward in India and handling the dispute. And that itself would be a $5-6 billion industry in 4 to 5 years' time once it takes off. So there is opportunity. India has, insofar as law is concerned, a talent which is waiting to be tapped. And this is something that we should certainly take advantage of.
I mean, I hope people in the government are listening on your arbitration view and that, because of course I understand a lot of arbitral, at least in SIAC Singapore, a lot of work goes out from India. There's no reason going out from India. A bulk of the work is from India. But let me ask Mr. Hiranandani. I've been told as many as 50 industries are dependent on construction. If you do well, they do well. If you don't do well, then they are all but doomed. What can be done to provide construction stimulus? Because we have seen that in the past years, there were fairs held in London and Dubai, a lot of investment into India, especially from NRIs, who are booking houses and units in Bombay and NCR. Currently, that seems to have come down. How can that be pushed up?
Well, I just need to correct you. It's not 50 industries, it's only 260 industries which are directly and indirectly connected with real estate construction, starting from what you mentioned earlier, steel, cement, and other things, right down to paints, to copper, to wiring, to plastics, to doors, to windows, to all the other things which are connected with building industry and that part of it. Second, any country in the world which wants to make GDP climb beyond 10% has always used investment into housing and infrastructure to go beyond 10%. And that is why the Western countries, barring the United States, can never, ever go beyond 4 or 5% compounded GDP growth, though their GDP is very, very high, cannot grow. So housing becomes a necessary ingredient. But there is a further consequence, which is much more important than just investment into housing, and that is employment. 15% of employment in India, I repeat, 15% of employment in India is housing and infrastructure. So between the two of the segments, we are really taking the skilled and unskilled people, skilled, of course, right from the kind which we have Mr. Karanjawala over here, architects, contractors, developers, and other people, to the unskilled person or the skilled person in terms of plumbers and other people and all that. So if you want to really take care of employment in India, which is even more important than just bringing capital into India, housing and infrastructure is very, very, very important. And that is why it's there. For which I think some encouragement came in 2006 and 12. Modifications of the law did come up in 2006 in terms of FDI. But this now needs to be further liberalized, and you should permit people to come and invest into development of housing in a much more liberal manner, and that part of it needs to be taken up. If you can also take up the slum rehabilitation, half of Mumbai is in Jhopatpattis. All of them are sitting on value of land, which is enormous. So all that could be taken up as another course. And the third, of course, is infrastructure. Like roads, we are now doing 35 kilometers of national highway per day under the NHAI and other schemes. This needs to be doubled. So I think all this we can do. And 10% GDP growth we can make for the asking. All this kind of talk about 4 and 5% is a shame, because we will never catch up to the $5 trillion economy which the PM wants, or be able to take care of the employment if we don't do it. So FDI is imperative. Housing, real estate is important. I think the ideas which Mr. Karanjawala gave and Mr. Sriram gave in terms of ease of doing business and creating innovative ideas in multiple fields will actually go a long way in order to make a paradigm of investment. We don't need an increase. You see, the Prime Minister is talking about an increase in investments. I don't think that is right. You have to talk about a paradigm change in the thought of how investment should come into, and innovative ideas need to come. Like Mr. Karanjawala said, litigation for the sake of litigation and looking behind your back is nonsensical waste of government money and precious judicial time which is taking place, and a disincentive to everybody to be done. I've seen so many cases where it's nonsensical. Final decisions have come in the High Court and even Supreme Court, and they want to go to the division bench of the Supreme Court in order to do some changes and all that and review petition. This must stop. If you don't stop it, good, clean investors are not going to look at India with big amounts of money. Though India, as Mr. Karanjawala said, is English speaking, and they have an advantage to come into India, and it's a great advantage. Remember, more investment went into China than India in the last 30 years. We need to change that paradigm. So it is not only English speaking. We need to do much, much more to show that the rollings on the ground is far more imperative. A start is made by the Honorable Prime Minister in terms of ease of doing business in many of the sectors, including real estate. But we can do much more because our people deserve it. We want it, and we can make into a new India for our children and grandchildren, which I really am proud of. I'm really proud and enthusiastic of my country, and we can make the change. That is why the statement of the Prime Minister becomes extremely important.
Okay. Point.
Tarun, before you ask the next person, I was reminded of an old saying they used to say in the old days about the Indian cricket team, that when Gavaskar scores, India scores. So now we know that when Hiranandani prospers, India prospers.
Real estate, please.
Wow.
Thank you.
Great.
We'll go to Alok Sriram at this note. While interacting with a lot of entrepreneurs, they speak about simplification of GST as a medium to encourage small industry. Do you see that as an ongoing process, or do you think that needs to, in a sense, accelerate?
Okay, on GST specifically, I would say the GST has been a great introduction. It has made a lot of things very much more streamlined. But I think we should look at simplifying and reducing rather than just keeping on tinkering, because when you tinker with laws, you just make little changes. Why can't we look at reducing them? And Mr. Karanjawala will, I'm sure, be able to talk a lot more about that. And on the 5 points which the Prime Minister made, I would just like to say that transparency and ecosystem are two areas which are of serious concern to any overseas investor. And the best way to show that there is actually on the ground transparency and on the ground a good ecosystem is to get your existing businessmen and entrepreneurs to say the same. If you ask anyone, he will say that it's not really trickled down. It may be in some state, maybe a little better than the others, but fundamentally there are still a lot of issues on the ground. And I think this is where the government needs to focus to make it actually easy. Also, many of these, I think the government is forming a lot of committees to help and improve the system, which is great. But very often the composition of those is not correct. I mean, you have, for example, a committee talking about ease of business in the corporate sector, but you have 30 people in the committee, out of which only 2 are businessmen. The rest are professionals, lawyers, chartered accountants, consultants. So really the guy who's getting affected the most is not being represented or not being able to put forward what he wants to say. I think that is something they must push much more and listen to these people. And I think they will start getting the results they want from within and from outside, both.
Point well taken. I'll go to Mr. Karanjawala. The Prime Minister made this statement yesterday when we were at the cusp of opening our economy back. What do you think is going on in the government? Because I know you keep on talking to people inside and outside enough, more than enough. We have earlier seen indications about ministers speaking, but now the Prime Minister has spoken. It wouldn't have been without some thought to it. What do you think is really going on in the government?
I think at the moment, obviously, the first major concern as far as the government is concerned is the health issue. How to deal with the third wave if it comes, because that has a direct impact on the economy. I mean, from economic terms, a medical collapse and a lockdown repeatedly coming one after another really impact. Today, I read somewhere in the newspaper that they feel that the impact was about 2 lakh crores for the second wave. So obviously, that's the first priority they have. On the economic front, I think it is a government that is constantly trying to wrestle and come out with something and see whether it works and so on. But I agree with Alok on one point, which is that one thing I think the government must do is to listen more to the community, to the business community, which is the community responsible for economic growth. You just have to open your avenues of listening and just keep listening to them again and again and again and again. Only then, after a period of time, will you allow them to convince you that what they are saying is correct. Because the one meeting, half an hour, 20 business people, one finance minister, everybody says something and goes home, that doesn't get absorbed. In fact, this is where I feel that the media itself, the TV channels, otherwise they're spending all the time showing something or the other. Why not every week, all designated TV channels have a situation where important people from different parts of business come over and just state their problems. Just state their problems, give a potential solution if they have it. Don't give it if they don't have it. There must be a constant dialogue between business and government. Because in a sense, they are the partners in ensuring India's prosperity.
Business and government. I have a last minute. I'll request Mr. Hiranandani to end it. How do you think the dialogue between business and government, because you headed ASSOCHAM, how do you think that progressing, or what is your wish list? Say a wish list of two things.
I think all of us have said the same thing. The ease of doing business, in short, needs to be further improved. India is a source which has got now $600 billion of foreign exchange already in the bank.
Correct.
This can be doubled in terms of investments that can come up in the next 1 year, according to me. We need to make that paradigm take place, which is to be done quickly. But the moment we focus, as both my panel friends, Mr. Karanchawala and Mr. Shriram have mentioned, you have to take the views of industries more seriously in doing. I'll give you one small example. Environmental clearance had improved tremendously in between for the purposes of giving. Again, we have a setback. I'm taking 1.5 to 2 years to get environmental clearance. I've talked to them. They are going to make the changes, but it has to happen on the ground. So we can't have that postponed. These things have to be done fast and quickly. And the moment you listen to us and do it quickly, not for me, not for my project, but for everybody who comes.
Everybody.
Yeah. This is most important that we do. And so nobody complains about environment. In ASSOCHAM, I've got 500 complaints about it. Why should I have 500 complaints? I should have 0 complaints, or maybe 1 or 2 people who are activists who like to complain for the sake of complaining. But the rest of it, we must not have. So when you get multiple problems like this, it is there. Of course, the government is listening, but we think that with the Prime Minister's statement, it will happen faster, better, quicker, and get more money into India.
That's a very good takeoff point. In fact, today I was watching another interview just before I started my show, and a promoter was saying that he's got business operations in about 80 countries. And in many of those countries, the government has paid the wages of his employees because his factory was shut. And I couldn't believe my ears when he said that, but he said it is true that the government has paid wages. We are not so rich so as to ensure that the government pays wages of the private sector. But even that happens in this world. And that is something to aspire that the government handholds the industry when it needs it. Thank you so much, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Mr. N. Karanchawala, and Mr. Alok Shriram for joining us on Policy and Politics. Thank you, viewers, for watching.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.